Everyone in the kingdom knew one rule: never, under any circumstance, touch the Dragon King. Not his hand, not his cloak, not even the air too close to his skin, because the moment flesh met flesh, it turned to ash. And yet before the entire royal court, she grabbed his hand, and nothing happened. No fire, no scream, no smoke rising into the vaulted ceilings of the throne hall. Just silence. A silence so deep it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. And that was the moment everything began to unravel. She had always been invisible, not in the mystical sense. No magic cloaked her presence. No spell hid her face. She was simply nothing. A servant girl born without a wolf, in a kingdom where even the lowest child carried the pulse of the beast beneath their skin. Among warriors and nobles who could shift into creatures of fang and fury, she remained painfully, humiliatingly human. They called her Empty, a name whispered in corridors, laughed behind goblets, spat like something bitter on the tongue. She scrubbed floors where nobles walked. She lowered her gaze when alphas passed. She learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable than the shadows that stretched along the stone walls. Because in a world ruled by strength, weakness was not pitied. It was erased. The day of her humiliation arrived wrapped in silk and cruelty. The royal court had gathered every alpha, every noble bloodline, every ambitious eye turned toward the great hall for a ceremonial demonstration of loyalty. Servants were brought forward, one by one, to kneel before the throne and swear their service. It was a tradition meant to reinforce order. But for her, it was something else. A spectacle. When her name was called, a ripple of quiet amusement moved through the court. "Bring forward the wolfless one," a noblewoman murmured, her voice dripping with delight. She stepped forward, barefoot against cold marble, her hands trembling despite every effort to steady them. The weight of hundreds of eyes pressed down on her like a physical force. At the center of it all sat the Dragon King. He did not move. He did not speak, but the air around him shimmered with heat. Even from a distance, it was suffocating, like standing too close to a forge that had never once cooled. His presence was not simply powerful, it was wrong, unnatural, as though his body rejected the world around him, burning everything that dared come near. She had heard the stories. Servants who brushed against him gone in an instant. Guards who tried to steady him, reduced to ash before they could scream. Even his own advisors kept their distance, because the Dragon King was not just feared, he was untouchable. "Kneel," came the command. She dropped to her knees. "Swear your loyalty." Another voice followed. Her throat tightened. The words felt heavy, foreign. Loyalty implied value, purpose, worth, things she had never been allowed to possess. Still, she opened her mouth, and then it happened. A guard behind her shoved her forward, hard. Her balance broke. Her body pitched ahead before she could stop it. And in that single, irreversible moment, she reached out. Her hand slammed against his. The court gasped as one. Some screamed. Others turned away, already expecting to witness her death. But no fire came. No flames devoured her skin. No ash drifted into the air. Instead, the Dragon King froze. His fingers, which had never held another living being without destroying it, remained still beneath her touch. His eyes, cold, ancient, and terrifying, snapped downward to where their skin met. And for the first time in years, the fire around him flickered. She should have pulled away. Every instinct screamed at her to let go, to retreat, to beg forgiveness. But something held her there, something deeper than fear, because for a single, impossible second, the heat was gone, not lessened, not weakened, gone. And in its place was something else, something steady, something alive. "Don't move." His voice was low, commanding, and laced with something no one in that room had ever heard from him before. Hook. The court erupted into chaos. How is she not burning? This is impossible. She touched him. The nobles rose from their seats, whispers turning into sharp, frantic voices. Some looked at her with horror, others with calculation. But the Dragon King did not look away from her. Not once. "Stand," he ordered. She obeyed, her legs barely able to support her weight. Slowly, carefully, he turned his hand, still holding hers. Testing, waiting, watching. Nothing happened. No fire. No destruction. Only silence. "Bring her closer," he said. The command sent a wave of unease through the court. "Your Majesty," one advisor began, pale with fear. "I said bring her closer." No one dared argue again. She was guided, pushed, really until she stood directly before the throne, close enough to feel the remnants of heat still clinging to him, close enough to see the truth no one spoke of. The Dragon King was not in control. His power was consuming him. "Look at me," he said. She hesitated, then obeyed. His eyes burned not with flame, but with something far more dangerous. "Need." "What are you?" he asked. She swallowed. "Nothing, Your Majesty." The answer echoed through the hall, and something shifted in his expression. "Nothing does not survive me," he said quietly. From that moment on, her life no longer belonged to her. She was taken not to the servant quarters, not back to the shadows, but to his chambers. A place no one entered. A place no one survived. The first night was a test. She stood across the room, every nerve in her body alive with tension as he approached. Slowly, deliberately, like a predator, unsure of its prey. "Do not run," he said. She didn't, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something deeper had taken hold. Curiosity. His hand lifted, hesitated, then pressed against her arm. Nothing. No fire. No pain. Only warmth. A sharp breath escaped him, not from exertion, but from relief. Rav. Unfiltered. Addictive. Again, he whispered. And this time, he didn't stop at her arm. Days turned into nights. Nights into something dangerously close to routine. He tested the limits of her presence, her skin, her proximity, and each time, the same result. She neutralized him, calmed him, silenced the fire that had ruled his existence. But there was a cost. She began to feel it, not immediately, not obviously, but slowly. Something inside her drained, like standing too long in winter, unaware of the cold creeping into your bones. And beyond those walls, the court watched, waited, plotted, because power like that could not remain unchallenged. And someone had already decided, if she could touch the Dragon King, then she could kill him too. The first attempt to kill her came before dawn. She woke to the scent of smoke, but not from the king. This fire was different, thin, bitter, crawling beneath the door of the small chamber they had given her beside his own. For one frozen heartbeat, she thought his curse had finally reached through the walls and found her in her sleep. Then she saw the black oil spilling beneath the door, saw the orange glow rising beyond it, and understood the truth. Someone had locked her inside and set the corridor aflame. She stumbled from the bed, coughing, her hands scraping against stone. But the window was too narrow, the door too hot, the smoke too thick. Outside, no guards shouted, no footsteps came. Whoever had done this had chosen the hour well. She pressed both palms against the burning door, expecting pain, expecting skin to blister, but the heat sank into her like water into dry earth. The flames bent toward her, not away, toward her, and deep beneath her ribs, something ancient stirred. She gasped as the fire vanished through the cracks, rushing into her palms in ribbons of gold and crimson, until the corridor beyond fell dark. When the door finally burst open, the Dragon King stood on the other side, half-dressed, barefoot against scorched stone, his eyes blazing with terror so violent it almost looked like rage. He did not look at the burned walls. He looked only at her hands. "Who did this?" he asked. She opened her mouth, but no answer came, because behind him, standing among the guards with perfect calm, was Lady Seraphine, the noblewoman promised by blood treaty to become his queen. And she was smiling. From that morning onward, the palace changed. The servants no longer called her empty where the king could hear, but their silence became sharper than insults. The nobles lowered their voices when she passed. The royal council demanded answers the Dragon King refused to give. Seraphine, beautiful as polished ivory and cold as a blade left in winter, began visiting the throne hall every day, dressed in red silk as if she already wore his fire. She never accused the servant girl directly. She did not need to. She merely asked questions in front of the court. Why had a wolfless slave survived what every warrior could not? Why did the king summon her at night? Why had his fires weakened since she came near him? And most dangerous of all, was she saving him or slowly binding him? The council listened, and fear did what fear always does in royal courts. It gave cowardice the appearance of wisdom. The Dragon King grew more restless as the whispers spread. He called her to him more often, not only when the curse flared, not only when the flames crawled up his arms and cracked the stone beneath his feet, but when the silence inside him became unbearable. At first he only took her hand. Then he began to keep her seated beside him during council meetings, where the nobles stared as though a servant on the king's right hand was a greater crime than murder. At night, when the fire beneath his skin raged hardest, he would stand in the dark and say nothing until she crossed the room to him. The first time she placed both hands against his chest, he trembled. The great Dragon King, conqueror of 7 wolf kingdoms, the man whose name made rival alphas kneel, trembled beneath the touch of a girl who had once scrubbed ash from his hearth. "Does it hurt?" she whispered. His jaw tightened. "Always." And that single word broke something in her, because until then, she had believed monsters did not suffer. But each time she calmed him, she weakened. Her fingers turned cold after touching him. Strange gold marks appeared beneath her skin, faint at first, then brighter, like veins filled with sunlight. She hid them beneath sleeves, but the king noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything about her now, the way she swayed after standing too long, the way her breath caught when his fire surged, the way she lied when he asked if she was well. One night, he caught her wrist before she could hide it. The gold lines glowed between them. His expression darkened. "You are paying for this." She tried to pull away. "It is nothing. Do not lie to me." His voice was quiet, but the room seemed to bow beneath it. "Everyone in this palace lies to me. You will not." She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not the king, not the curse, not the living fire, but the man trapped inside it. "If I stop," she said, "you burn." His grip loosened, not because he wanted to release her, but because the truth had wounded him more deeply than any blade. That was the beginning of his restraint, and the beginning of her danger. He tried to keep distance. She saw it in the way he folded his hands behind his back when she entered, the way he stood across the room though the fire visibly tortured him, the way he dismissed her before nightfall even when sweat burned at his temples. But the curse punished him for mercy. Without her touch, his body rejected the world with renewed violence. Candles melted before he passed them. Iron handles glowed red beneath his fingers. The stone floor cracked wherever he stood too long. On the third night, his monstrous form emerged. It began with wings, not fully formed, not free, but shadows of them tearing from his back in a storm of heat and black flame. His spine bowed. Scales rose along his neck. His eyes turned molten gold. The guards fled before he could command them to stay. Only she remained, frozen in the doorway as the Dragon King became the beast his enemies prayed he would become. He roared, and the windows shattered outward into the night. "Leave," he forced through clenched teeth. "I cannot hold it." She should have obeyed. Every sane part of her begged her to run. But then he looked at her not as a king, not as a beast, but as a man terrified of what he might do. And she crossed the broken glass barefoot. "Do not come closer," he growled. She kept walking. I said, "Leave." The flames rose higher, circling him like a living crown. She stepped through them. They bent away from her skin, then rushed into her body, bright and terrible. When her palms touched his face, the beast inside him shuddered. His claws dug into stone. His wings collapsed into smoke, and slowly, impossibly, he leaned into her hands like a starving creature finding warmth for the first time. By dawn, every courtier in the palace had heard what happened. By noon, Seraphine had turned rumor into accusation. By dusk, the royal council summoned them both before the throne. Not the Dragon King's throne, the ancient judgment seat beneath the Hall of Ashes, where kings themselves could be challenged if the council believed the realm was endangered. It was a trap, and he knew it. Still, he went, because kings who refused judgment looked guilty before history. She stood beside him in plain gray linen, surrounded by nobles in jewels and armor, feeling smaller than ever beneath the painted eyes of dead rulers. Seraphine stepped forward with a silver dagger in her hand and a softness in her voice that fooled no one. "Your Majesty," she said, "we do not question your strength, we question hers." She turned toward the court. A wolfless slave appears from nowhere, survives dragonfire, drains the king's power, and now his curse worsens whenever she is absent. Is that salvation or possession? The council murmured. The Dragon King's hand curled into a fist. Heat rolled across the floor. She felt it searching for her, reaching instinctively, but he held himself back. Seraphine saw it and smiled. Let her prove innocence. Let her touch the sacred flame. At the far end of the hall, an ancient brazier burned with white fire, said to reveal forbidden blood. No servant was allowed near it. No liar survived it. The girl's stomach dropped. The Dragon King turned on the council. No. His voice shook the pillars. This judgment ends now. But Seraphine had already won the room. If she is nothing, she said, then nothing will happen. They dragged her forward. The king moved, and 20 spears lowered toward him, not because the guards could stop him, but because the council wanted the kingdom to see him choose violence for a servant. She looked back at him once. His face was carved from fury and fear. "Do not touch it," he commanded. But for the first time since she had entered his life, she did not obey. She placed her hand into the white flame. The hall exploded with light. Not fire, not smoke. Light. Vast, golden, ancient light surged from the brazier and wrapped around her like a crown remembering its queen. The gray linen burned away into luminous ash, but her skin remained untouched. Across her arms, the hidden gold veins blazed into the shape of scales. Behind her, the shadow of enormous wings unfurled against the wall, not his wings, hers. The court fell to its knees without understanding why. The white flame rose higher, forming words in a language older than the wolf kingdoms, older than the dragon throne, older than betrayal itself. The Dragon King stared at her, as if seeing the answer to a question his blood had been asking all his life. Then the oldest counselor whispered the name no one had spoken for 3 centuries. The Ember Blood Heir. Seraphine's smile vanished. The truth broke over the hall like judgment. She was not wolfless because she was empty. She was wolfless because no wolf could live inside dragon blood. She was the last descendant of the ancient Ember Blood Queens, the royal line that had once balanced the Dragon Kings, not by serving them, not by obeying them, but by anchoring the fire inside their bodies so it would not consume the world. Her blood did not absorb his flame by accident. It recognized him, and his fire did not spare her because it was weak. It spared her because it had been searching for her since the day he was cursed. Seraphine lunged before anyone could stop her. The silver dagger flashed toward the girl's heart, but the Dragon King moved faster than flame. He caught the blade in his bare hand. For one breath, the court expected the dagger to melt. Instead, blood ran down his palm. Real blood, human blood. Because while she stood within the sacred flame, his curse was silent. For the first time in years, he could bleed instead of burn. He looked at the blood in wonder. Then he looked at Seraphine. "You tried to murder my queen." The word queen shattered the last illusion of order. Rival alphas rose. Seraphine screamed that the Ember bloodline was cursed, that the servant had bewitched him, that no court would bow to Ashborn blood. The traitorous commander of the royal guard drew his sword and declared the king unfit, claiming the council's authority to seize the throne before dragon madness destroyed them all. And then the war, hidden beneath courtly manners, finally revealed its teeth. Chaos consumed the Hall of Ashes. Wolves shifted between pillars, tearing silk and armor as they lunged. Flame spiraled from the ancient brazier. The Dragon King fought without unleashing the full curse, because she was still too close, still glowing, still draining herself to keep him whole. He saw her knees buckle, saw the light in her veins flicker, and for the first time, he chose not to take what she offered. He chose to give something back. He crossed the hall through blood and fire, seized her hand, and pressed it against his chest. "No more," he said. "You will not die keeping me alive." She looked up at him, trembling. "If I let go, you become the curse again." His eyes softened in the middle of battle, impossibly, painfully. "Then let the curse take me." But she understood then what he did not. The bond was not meant to be one way. She was not born to be consumed. She was born to command the balance. So when the commander raised a black iron spear forged to pierce dragon hearts and hurled it toward the king's back, she stepped in front of him. The spear struck the light around her and stopped inches from her chest. Her eyes ignited gold. Her voice, when it came, did not sound like the servant girl they had mocked. It sounded like a throne waking from a long sleep. "Kneel." Every flame in the hall obeyed. The sacred brazier, the torches, the burning banners, even the fire beneath the Dragon King's skin surged outward and bowed toward her. The wolves froze. The nobles dropped to the floor as pressure filled the hall, ancient and absolute. The commander screamed as his black spear melted into dust. Seraphine staggered backward, all her beauty stripped bare by terror. The girl looked at her and saw every corridor insult, every cruel smile, every hand that had shoved her toward death. But she did not burn her. She did something worse. She spared her before the entire court. "Let her live," she said, "so she remembers whom she called nothing." The Dragon King looked at the girl then, not with possession, not with hunger, not with the desperate need that had first chained them together, but with reverence. He lowered himself to one knee before her. The court gasped, because Dragon Kings did not kneel, not to councils, not to gods, not to fate. Yet he knelt before the servant girl with ash on her feet and fire in her blood, and he placed his wounded hand over his heart. "I choose her," he said, his voice carrying through the ruined hall. "Not because she saves me, not because my curse demands her. I choose her because every soul in this kingdom saw her suffer and called it weakness, while she carried a power greater than all of us, and still chose mercy." The mate bond struck like thunder. It was not soft. It was not gentle. It was a collision of ancient fire and living blood, a force that cracked the white marble beneath them and sent golden flames spiraling into the broken roof. She felt him not only his power, but his loneliness, his agony, every year of untouchable silence. Every night he stood alone, afraid to breathe too near another living thing. And he felt her, the girl who had scrubbed floors while royal blood slept hidden in her veins, the child who had been called empty so often she nearly believed it, the woman who could have let the world burn, and instead chose to hold it together with her bare hands. When the light faded, the curse was changed. Not gone, not destroyed, transformed. The Dragon King's fire no longer lashed blindly at the world. It moved beneath his skin, like a sleeping beast answering to two hearts instead of one. He reached for her slowly, not because he feared burning her now, but because choice mattered. She gave him her hand. This time, the touch did not drain her. Warmth passed between them, equal and steady. His thumb brushed over the gold marks on her wrist, and they softened into delicate lines like a living crown beneath her skin. Seraphine and the traitorous commander were taken away before sunset. The corrupt council was stripped of authority, its eldest members forced to swear before the sacred flame they had tried to weaponize. The rival alphas who had come hoping to witness weakness bowed instead to a union older than their bloodlines. And the servant quarters, where she had once slept, nameless and cold, were opened by royal decree. No child born without a wolf would again be called empty in his kingdom. That night, she returned not to the small chamber beside his, but to the high balcony overlooking the Black Mountains, where dragon fire once lit the sky in lonely storms. The king stood beside her, no longer surrounded by unbearable heat. For the first time, snow began to fall over the volcanic peaks without melting before it touched the stone. He watched it with quiet wonder, then looked at her as though the world had given him something too fragile to deserve. "You could leave," he said. "After everything this palace did to you, no oath binds you here." She turned her palm upward, the same hand that had once accidentally saved him before the entire court. "And if I stay?" His breath caught, and she saw the feared Dragon King become simply a man afraid to hope. "Then I will spend the rest of my life proving you were never born to be used." She stepped closer. "I was not born to be your cure." "No," he said, lowering his forehead to hers. "You were born to be my equal." And when he kissed her, the kingdom did not burn. The mountains did not crack. The ancient curse did not rise to punish them. Instead, deep beneath the palace, the sacred flame turned gold, and every wolf in the capital lifted its head as one, sensing the birth of a bond powerful enough to change the fate of kings. The girl once called empty stood beside the Dragon King as the last Emberblood queen, no longer hidden, no longer owned, no longer afraid of the fire that had tried to devour them both. And for the first time in his cursed life, the Dragon King slept with her hand in his, not because he needed her to survive the night, but because he had finally found a world that did not reject him. But peace did not come simply because the Dragon King had chosen her. In kingdoms built on old blood and older pride, love was never allowed to arrive without a blade hidden beneath it. By morning, the entire capital knew that the servant girl once called empty had stood in the sacred flame and survived, that the Dragon King had knelt before her, that the court had watched his curse bow to her blood. Some whispered her name with wonder, others with fear, but the most dangerous ones whispered it with hatred. Because a girl raised among ashes had done what noble daughters had failed to do for years. She had touched the untouchable king, and instead of dying, she had become the one person no throne could ignore. The palace tried to dress her in silk before sunrise, but every gown they brought felt like a costume stolen from someone else's life. She stood before a polished bronze mirror, while 3 trembling attendants fastened gold clasps around her wrists, and all she could see was the same girl who had once scrubbed soot from hearthstones until her hands cracked. Only now, beneath her skin, golden lines shimmered faintly, pulsing whenever the Dragon King drew near, and he was always near. Not openly at first, not in a way the court could easily name, but his presence followed her like a storm refusing to break. Guards doubled outside her doors. Poison tasters appeared at every meal. Corridors emptied before she walked through them. Not because she commanded it, but because he had made one thing clear without saying it twice. Anyone who touched her without permission would answer to fire. Yet protection could become another kind of cage, and she felt it before he did. The first week after the reveal, he tried to keep her away from every council session, every public ceremony, every noble gathering where resentment might sharpen into danger. "You have survived enough courts," he told her one evening, as red dusk bled through the balcony arches. "You do not need to endure another room full of smiling wolves." She looked at him carefully, at the man who had once demanded her touch, because his own body was a prison, and she understood the fear beneath his command. "If I hide now," she said, "they will say I am only powerful when you stand in front of me." His jaw tightened. "Let them say it. I have lived my whole life beneath names other people gave me." Her voice did not rise, but something in it made the torches flicker. "Empty, wolfless, servant, threat, curse. I will not add coward to that list. For a moment." Anger flashed across his face, not at her defiance, but at the world that had taught her to defend her own existence with every breath. Then the anger faded, leaving only the ache he did not know how to hide. "I cannot lose you," he said. And there it was, the truth neither of them had fully spoken. His need for her had begun as survival, but now it had become something far more dangerous, because a king could command armies, conquer borders, burn enemies from the earth, and still be helpless before the thought of one woman disappearing from his reach. So she went to the council chamber the next day, not behind him, beside him. The nobles watched her as though she were a flame brought indoors, beautiful, only until it spread. The remaining counselors bowed, but their eyes betrayed them. They saw the servant's posture beneath the new silk. They saw the faint gold under her skin. They saw the king's hand resting close to hers, not touching, but ready. The meeting began with land disputes from the northern wolf packs, tribute failures from border lords, and petitions from minor houses suddenly eager to prove loyalty. But beneath every word lay the same question. What was she now? A queen? A weapon? A cure? A threat? Then Lord Vare, an elderly alpha with silver hair and a voice like dry parchment, rose from his seat. "Your Majesty," he said, never once looking at her. "With respect to the old laws, no woman may sit beside the dragon throne until formally recognized by blood trial, council assent, and royal bond sealing." The chamber grew quiet. The Dragon King's eyes darkened. "Choose your next words with care." Lord Vare bowed his head just enough to avoid open rebellion. "I ask only for order. The girl's blood may be ancient, but it is unverified beyond spectacle. Sacred flame can be manipulated. Prophecy can be misread, and a mate bond, especially one formed under distress, may be a curse wearing the face of destiny." The words struck exactly where they were meant to. Her fingers went cold. A curse wearing the face of destiny. She had wondered the same thing in the darkest corner of her own heart. Did he want her, or did his fire want her? Did she stay because she chose him, or because her blood had been made for his? The Dragon King rose slowly, and heat rolled across the table. "You accuse your king of being bewitched." "I accuse no one," Lord Vare said. "I ask for proof." Proof became the weapon they used against her. The council could not deny what the court had seen, so they demanded more. If she was truly Emberblood, she must enter the mirror crypt below the palace, where old queens had once faced the memories of their line. If she emerged with the ancestral mark, the court would recognize her claim. If she failed, the council would declare her an unstable magical anomaly and place her under royal confinement. For her own protection, the Dragon King refused at once. The mirror crypt had not been opened in 3 centuries. No one knew what waited beneath it. But the more he refused, the more the council looked at her as if she were a frightened servant hiding behind a monster. And so, before he could burn the chamber down with politics still inside it, she stood. "I will enter." His head turned sharply. "No." She met his eyes in front of them all. "Yes." The room held its breath, sensing the first true fracture between them. He leaned closer, voice low enough only she could hear. "You do not understand what ancient places take from living blood." "Then tell me." Pain moved through his expression. "I cannot. The old records were destroyed." "Then you do not know it will kill me." "I know everything this court asks of you is meant to cut you until you bleed obedience." Her heart twisted, but she did not look away. "Then let them see what rises when I bleed." The mirror crypt opened at moonrise. The entrance lay beneath the Hall of Ashes, sealed behind a door of black stone veined with gold. When the Dragon King pressed his palm to it, the stone did not burn. It recognized the altered fire in him now, the flame steadied by their bond. With a groan like the earth remembering pain, the door parted. Cold air breathed out, not the clean cold of winter, but the ancient cold of sealed grief. She descended alone because the law demanded it, though she felt him above her with every step. Their bond stretched thin between them like a thread of flame. Down below, the crypt was not a tomb. It was a palace beneath a palace, carved from obsidian and filled with mirrors taller than towers. Each mirror reflected a different version of her. In one, she was the barefoot servant girl. In another, a queen crowned in fire. In another, a corpse with gold cracks across her skin. She walked forward, and the mirrors began to whisper. They spoke in voices like women singing through smoke. Daughter, ashborn, hidden flame. Last of the line. Then the reflections changed. She saw a battlefield from centuries before. Dragon kings burning entire armies because no ember-blood queen stood beside them. She saw women with her same golden veins chained by rulers who loved their power more than their souls. She saw one queen place both hands on a king's chest and burn away into light while he survived, weeping over ashes. She stumbled back, horror tightening around her throat. This was the truth the legends had hidden. Emberblood women had not always been honored. Sometimes they had been consumed. Sometimes they had been called destiny, when the world meant sacrifice. Above, the Dragon King felt her fear through the bond and nearly broke the law to go after her. The council watched him from a distance, tense and eager, waiting for grief to make him reckless. His fists clenched so hard the stone beneath his feet cracked. In the crypt, she reached the final mirror. Unlike the others, it reflected nothing. Its surface was dark, still, and endless. When she touched it, the glass softened like water and pulled her inside. Suddenly she stood in a chamber of white flame, and before her waited a woman crowned in embers. She was older, regal, sorrowful, with the same gold-lit skin and eyes that seemed to carry every dawn ever born. "You are late," the woman said. The girl could barely breathe. "Who are you?" "The first queen who refused to die for a king." The words struck harder than any vision. The woman moved closer, her gown trailing sparks across the unseen floor. "They told you your blood exists to save him. Does it not?" The queen's smile was sad. "Your blood exists to balance fire. Balance is not surrender. It is not obedience. It is not letting a man, even a wounded one, turn your life into medicine." Tears burned in her eyes before she could stop them. "Then why does touching him feel like coming home?" "Because some bonds are true," the queen said softly. "And some truths still become chains when fear holds them too tightly." When she emerged from the crypt hours later, dawn had turned the sky pale above the broken roof of the Hall of Ashes. The entire council waited. So did the Dragon King. He looked as if he had not moved once all night. The moment she stepped through the black door, his control nearly broke. But he stopped himself, waiting for her choice, for her signal, for permission to cross the distance. That restraint, more than any vow, told her the crypt had not lied about him. He was capable of need without taking, love without consuming, power without possession. She lifted her hand. Only then did he come to her. The council saw the mark before he reached her. A crown of gold fire glowing at the base of her throat, delicate and unmistakable. Lord Vare went pale. The blood trial had not merely recognized her. It had crowned her. The Dragon King stopped in front of her, his eyes fixed on the mark, and for one fragile breath, the feared ruler of the realm looked humbled beyond words. "What did it show you?" he asked. She answered honestly, because the bond between them could not survive pretty lies. "That women like me have died saving men like you." The words landed in silence. His face changed, and she saw the wound open in him. Not anger, shame. He stepped back at once, as though his closeness itself had become a threat. Then, "I will never ask again. That is not what I said. It is what I should have understood." His volproti. His voice roughened. "I called you my equal before the court. Then let them send you beneath the earth to prove you deserve to stand beside me." She reached for him, but this time he did not take her hand. "I have spent years fearing my fire would destroy anyone who came near me," he said. I never feared that my need might do the same. And then he turned away not because he did not love her, but because he did. That emotional retreat became the cruelest distance between them. He protected her still, honored her publicly, gave her authority the court could not ignore. But he stopped reaching for her in the quiet, stopped asking her to calm the fire when it hurt him, stopped sleeping with her hand in his. At first, she told herself, this was what freedom should feel like. Space, choice, no demand. But every night, through the bond, she felt his pain flare behind walls of restraint. She felt him walking alone in chambers scorched by his own skin, felt him biting back roars until blood filled his mouth, felt him choosing suffering because he had mistaken distance for respect. And she, proud enough not to beg and wounded enough to doubt, let the silence grow. The palace noticed. Seraphine, though imprisoned in the western tower awaiting judgment, noticed most of all. Hatred sharpened her patience. From behind iron bars, she began sending messages through servants still loyal to her house. If the Emberblood girl had created distance between herself and the king, then the curse could be turned again. And if the curse returned in full before the realm, the council would have its proof that neither love nor ancient blood could save him. The attack came during the Moon Tribunal, a gathering of the werewolf kingdoms under the Dragon King's rule. Alphas from the Frost Packs, the River Clans, the Ironwood territories, and the Southern Red Wolves filled the great amphitheater beyond the palace walls. It was a night of public oaths, where each pack renewed allegiance beneath the full moon. She stood beside the throne in a gown of deep ember gold, her ancestral mark visible for all to see. The Dragon King stood apart from her by several steps, a distance no one else understood but everyone felt. Rival Alpha Kale of the Ironwood pack watched that distance with predatory interest. He was broad, scarred, and ambitious, a ruler who had obeyed only because the Dragon King's curse made rebellion suicidal. But now, the curse had weakened, the king bled, the servant queen doubted, and men like Kale could smell fracture the way wolves smelled blood. When the sacred horn sounded, each alpha approached to kneel. Kyle came last. He bowed lower than required, then looked up with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said, "we are honored to see the realm steadied by your companion." The insult was wrapped in silk. The amphitheater chilled. The Dragon King's fire stirred, but he held it down. She stepped forward before he could speak. "You may address me as Emberblood." Kyle's gaze slid to her throat. Blood is easy to claim in times of fear. A murmur passed through the packs. Power is harder. Then he did the one thing no one expected. He drew a small silver chain from his cloak and threw it onto the moonlit stone between them. Attached to it was a collar blackened by dragonfire, her old servant collar. Gasps rippled outward. "I found this in the lower quarters," Kale said, "a touching relic. Tell me, my lady, does royal blood remember the feel of a chain?" The humiliation hit like a slap. Not because the collar exposed her past, everyone knew what she had been, but because for one moment she was back there again. Barefoot, nameless, laughed at, by people who believed cruelty was proof of rank. The Dragon King moved. She felt his rage before the flames appeared. The air warped. Stone groaned. Kale wanted exactly that. If the king unleashed fire before the assembled packs over an insult, he would look unstable, ruled by attachment, weakened by the woman he claimed as equal. She reached for him through the bond, not with magic, but with a single, silent plea. "Do not let him make me your wound." The flames stopped inches from the ground. The king's eyes burned white gold, but he did not strike. She bent, picked up the collar, and held it before the entire tribunal. Her voice carried across the amphitheater. "Yes," she said, "royal blood remembers the chain. It remembers who fastened it, who ignored it, who benefited from it, and who now fears the neck beneath it was never bowed, only waiting." Then she closed her fist. The collar melted not from his fire, but from hers. Golden flame poured between her fingers, clean and controlled. The packs went silent. Alpha Kale's smile faded. But Seraphine's true plan had not been humiliation. It had been poison, not in wine, not in food, in the sacred horn itself. When it sounded again for the final oath, the note carried a forbidden resonance, an ancient anti-dragon spell hidden in music, designed to awaken the curse and sever any balancing bond. The sound ripped through the amphitheater. The Dragon King staggered. Fire burst from his skin in a violent ring. Wolf screamed as heat slammed into the stone seats. She rushed toward him, but the force threw her back. For the first time since the bond formed, his fire did not recognize her. His eyes turned molten and empty. Wings of black flame tore from his back. Scales climbed across his face. The monstrous form returned, larger and more terrible than before. The assembled alphas drew weapons. Kale shouted, "Behold your king!" And the rebellion began. The amphitheater descended into war beneath the moon. Wolves shifted mid-leap, their bodies twisting into massive beasts that charged the throne. Dragon fire spiraled upward, uncontrolled, striking pillars and turning banners into suns. The Dragon King fought himself harder than he fought them, roaring as he tried to pull the flames inward before they reached her. She could feel him somewhere beneath the curse, trapped behind burning walls. She ran toward him again, but Alpha Kale intercepted her in wolf form, a massive iron-gray beast with jaws wide enough to crush her spine. He lunged. She raised her hands, and golden fire formed a shield just as his claws struck. The impact drove her to her knees. Around her, loyal guards battled traitors, packs turned on packs, and above them all the Dragon King's monstrous shadow blotted out the moon. Kyle shifted back just enough to speak, blood on his teeth. "You are not his salvation," he snarled. "You are the leash, and I will free the realm from both of you." He struck again, and this time her shield cracked. She was still learning power that her ancestors had carried from birth. He was a war, Alpha, forged through decades of violence. He drove her backward across the broken stone until her shoulder slammed into the base of the throne. The Dragon King saw it, even through the curse, even through the spell tearing his mind apart. He saw Kale standing over her. Something human awakened inside the beast. He roared Kale's name with such fury that every wolf in the amphitheater froze. But when he tried to move toward her, the anti-dragon resonance twisted tighter around him, turning his own fire inward. Black cracks spread across his chest. He was burning from within. She understood then that Seraphine had not meant merely to expose him. She had meant to make him destroy himself before the realm. There are moments when fear ends not because courage arrives, but because love becomes more unbearable than death. She rose despite the blood at her temple, despite the trembling in her legs, despite the ancestral queen's warning that balance must never become sacrifice. This was not surrender. This was choice. She stepped past Kale and walked into the inferno surrounding the Dragon King. The flames struck her like 1,000 blades. Her skin lit gold. The bond screamed. He saw her coming and fought to retreat, but chains of sound held him in place. "No," he growled, voice broken between man and beast. "Do not." She kept walking. "You told me I was your equal." "Yes, then stop deciding alone what I am allowed to risk." His monstrous eyes filled with pain. "I will kill you." She reached the center of the fire and placed both hands against his burning chest. This time, she did not absorb. She commanded, "Then find me before you do." The world vanished into flame. Inside the curse she saw him. Not the king, not the beast, but the boy he had been before power became punishment. A child standing in a nursery of burning curtains while adults screamed beyond the door. A prince whose dragon blood awakened too early, too violently, incinerating the nurse who tried to comfort him. A young ruler taught never to touch, never to cry, never to desire closeness because desire made him dangerous. A man crowned, not by triumph, but by isolation. He had not rejected the world first. The world had recoiled from him, until his body learned to do the same. She moved through that memory fire and found him kneeling in the center of it, hands covered in ash. I am tired, he whispered. I know, she said. I have burned everything. Not me. He looked up at her, eyes haunted. I wanted to. The confession would have frightened anyone else. But she heard what lay beneath it. Not cruelty, but terror. He had wanted to hold her so badly that need itself felt monstrous. She knelt before him. Wanting is not taking. She held out her hand. Come back. When they emerged from the flame, the amphitheater was silent. The Dragon King stood in human form, shaking, his face streaked with ash and tears. No one dared acknowledge. Her hands remained pressed to his chest, but the gold light no longer drained her. It flowed between them in a circle, fire answering blood, blood answering fire. The anti-dragon spell shattered with a sound like glass breaking beneath the moon. Across the amphitheater, the sacred horn cracked open, revealing a hidden black rune carved inside. Every eye turned towards Seraphine's tower in the distance. Her betrayal was no longer rumor. It was proof. Alpha Kale, seeing the rebellion falter, made one final desperate move. He seized a fallen spear and charged not at the Dragon King, but at her. The king turned, but she lifted one hand. This time, she did not need saving. The ground beneath KL erupted with golden flame, not burning his flesh, but binding his shadow to the stone. He collapsed mid-stride, unable to move. She walked toward him slowly, the entire tribunal watching. You wanted proof of power, she said. Here it is. Kyle strained, veins bulging in his neck. Kill me then. She looked at the assembled packs, at the nobles, at the soldiers who had once watched her humiliation as entertainment. No. Death is too easy for men who mistake cruelty for strength. She turned to the Frostpack Alpha, an older woman with silver eyes who had not joined the rebellion. Let him stand trial before the packs whose sons he brought here to die for his ambition. The Frost Alpha bowed. Not to the Dragon King, to her. That bow changed everything. One by one, the loyal Alphas knelt. Not from fear of dragonfire, not from obligation to the throne, but because they had seen the girl once mocked as wolfless stand between madness and massacre and choose justice over vengeance. The Dragon King watched them kneel before her, and no jealousy touched him. Only pride. Fierce, quiet, devastating pride. When she returned to his side, he did not reach for her in front of them all. He waited. She slipped her hand into his. The gesture was small, but the amphitheater felt it like a coronation. Seraphine was brought down from the western tower before dawn. She had traded silk for prison gray, but even chained, she held herself like a woman who believed beauty could still command mercy. They brought her into the damaged throne hall, where the sacred flame now burned gold instead of white. The council gathered, diminished and afraid. The packs stood witness. Seraphine looked first at the Dragon King, then at the girl beside him. Hatred flickered, but beneath it was something uglier. Grief. It should have been me, she said. Her voice was raw now, stripped of courtly music. I was raised for him, trained for him, promised to him. Every lesson, every ritual, every breath of my life was shaped around becoming queen. Then, a servant touched his hand by accident, and destiny threw me away. For the first time, the girl saw not only the villain, but the wound that had fed her. It did not excuse the murders, the fire, the poison, the rebellion, but it made the cruelty human, and somehow that made it worse. The Dragon King's voice was cold. You tried to burn her alive, because she took the only future I was allowed to want. Seraphine turned to her then. Do you think mercy makes you better than me? You stand there with his hand in yours because fate chose your blood. Had it chosen mine, you would still be scrubbing floors. The words struck deep because part of them was true. Fate was not fairness. Blood was not virtue. Power did not make suffering meaningful. The girl stepped closer. You are right about one thing, she said. If my blood had never awakened, this court would have left me in chains. The hall stilled. "That is why the court must change." Seraphine blinked, thrown by the answer. "You expected me to deny it. I will not. This kingdom does not become just because I rose within it. It becomes just when no girl needs ancient blood to be treated as human." The sacred flame flared behind her, as if the old queens approved. Judgment was passed before sunset. Seraphine was stripped of title and sent to the northern monastery fortress, not as a guest, not as a martyr, but as a prisoner under oath, where she would spend her life healing those burned by the wars her family had funded. Lord Vare and the corrupt counselors were removed from office. Alphaking was delivered to the Pack Tribunal. The traitorous commander, who had survived the Hall of Ashes, confessed under sacred flame that half the rebellion had been planned months before the servant girl ever touched the king. They had always intended to overthrow him. She had merely become their excuse. That revelation spread across the kingdom faster than fear. People began to understand that the Dragon King's curse had not been the only danger in the realm. Men without fire had done just as much burning, but victory did not heal everything. In the days that followed, she struggled beneath the weight of her new name: Emberblood, Queen-marked, Flamebinder, Savior. The words changed depending on who spoke them, but each one tried to turn her into something larger than a person. In private, she still woke from dreams of the mirror crypt, seeing ancient queens vanish into the men they loved. Sometimes she pulled her hands away from the Dragon King before realizing she had done it. Sometimes he flinched from touching her, haunted by the same fear from the other side. Love had saved them in battle, but ordinary tenderness required a different courage. No prophecy could teach them how to sit together in silence without wondering who owed what to whom. One night, weeks after the rebellion, she found him in the old nursery of the East Wing. It had been sealed for years. The walls were still scarred by fire, though someone had tried to cover the damage with tapestries. He stood before a small blackened cradle, his face unreadable. She remained at the doorway. "Is this where it began?" He nodded. "I was 4. The number made her chest ache. 4 years old, and already treated as a disaster. They told me later I had killed a woman who loved me." His voice was steady, but she knew what steadiness cost him. "After that, no one entered my room without gloves, chains, or fear." She crossed the room slowly and stood beside him. "You were a child. Children can still destroy." "Yes," she said softly, "but they should not be left alone with the ashes." He closed his eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "When you first touched me in the throne hall, I wanted to lock every door in the palace and keep you where no one could take you." The confession hung between them, dark and honest. "I know. I am ashamed of that." "Good," she said, and his eyes opened in surprise. She smiled faintly, sadly. "Shame means you know the difference between love and hunger." He looked at her then, as if she had placed a blade in his hand and trusted him not to use it. "And do you trust me?" She took time before answering, because the truth deserved more than comfort. "I trust the man who fights his hunger. I do not trust fate blindly. I do not trust crowns. I do not trust need when it goes unnamed." She reached for him. "But I trust what you choose after you name it." His hand trembled before he took hers. That night, he did not ask her to calm the fire. She did not offer to. They simply sat together on the nursery floor until dawn touched the burned walls. And somehow, that became more intimate than any desperate touch before it. No curse forced them. No court watched them. No prophecy demanded proof. When his fire stirred, he breathed through it. When her gold marks glowed, she let them fade naturally. They were two wounded creatures learning that love could be quiet and still be real. The coronation came at midsummer. Not a wedding first, though the court expected one. She insisted on recognition before romance, law before ceremony, change before celebration. The Dragon King agreed without hesitation, and that agreement did more to silence opposition than any threat could have. Before the gathered kingdom, he amended the old hierarchy. Wolfless children could no longer be enslaved by packhouses. Servant collars were outlawed in royal territories. Any noble found using blood status to claim ownership over another living soul would lose title, land, and protection. The alphas shifted uneasily at the decrees, but none dared oppose them openly, not after the Moon Tribunal. She stood beside the king while the laws were read, hearing whispers ripple through the crowd. Some called her dangerous, some called her impossible. But in the back of the hall, among the servants, a little girl with no wolf stared at her with wide, shining eyes. That was the moment the new queen nearly wept. Only after the laws were sealed did she agree to the bonding ceremony. It was not held in the throne hall, where humiliation had first made them visible to each other, nor in the Hall of Ashes, where power had been revealed through violence. She chose the ruined garden behind the east wing, a place long abandoned because nothing had grown there since the Dragon King's curse first scorched the soil. On the morning of the ceremony, servants cleared the ash, opened the stone channels, and brought water from the mountain springs. She walked barefoot over the black earth in a gown the color of dawn. The Dragon King waited beneath the skeletal branches of an ancient tree, dressed not in armor, not in conquest black, but in simple, dark ceremonial robes edged with gold. He looked less like a weapon that day, more like a man standing before the possibility of being loved without fear. The bond vows were older than the wolf kingdoms. He spoke first, voice low enough for intimacy, strong enough for the gathered realm. I do not claim you as cure, shield, possession, or destiny's payment. I choose you as sovereign of your own fire. I choose your will above my need, your freedom above my fear, and your life beside mine only so long as you desire it. The words moved through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Many did not understand how radical they were. She did. Her throat tightened, but when she spoke, her voice did not break. I do not bind myself to your pain as sacrifice, nor to your throne as ornament. I choose the man who came back from the fire when I called, the king who knelt not to own me, but to honor what he had failed to see. I choose your hand when it is offered, never when it is demanded. I choose the flame we carry together. Then she placed her palm against his chest, and he placed his over her heart. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the dead garden bloomed, not slowly, not with the gentle patience of spring. It erupted. Black soil split open, gold-veined flowers burst from ash. Vines climbed ruined pillars. The ancient tree above them shuddered, and leaves of deep crimson unfurled across its branches like living fire. The crowd gasped as petals drifted through the air, glowing faintly before dissolving into warmth. The Dragon King looked around in stunned silence, then down at her. You did this. She shook her head, smiling through tears. No, we did. And when they kissed beneath the reborn tree, the fire that rose around them did not threaten the world. It illuminated it. Years later, songs would claim that the servant girl saved the Dragon King with a touch. Songs always preferred simple lies. The truth was harder and far more beautiful. She had not saved him by letting herself be consumed. He had not loved her by needing her more fiercely than anyone else. They saved each other in the places where power was not enough, in restraint, in truth, in the painful choice to unlearn every cruel lesson the world had carved into them. The Dragon King still carried fire beneath his skin. The Emberblood Queen still bore gold in her veins. The kingdom still had wolves with pride, nobles with ambition, borders with enemies, and histories that did not vanish because one crown changed hands. But in the palace where servants once lowered their eyes and no one dared touch the king, children now ran through the rebuilt garden, laughing beneath crimson leaves. Some had wolves, some did not. None wore collars. And on quiet nights, when snow fell over the volcanic mountains and the sacred flame burned low beneath the palace, the Dragon King would wake from dreams of ash to find her beside him, not as a cure, not as a chain, but as a choice renewed with every dawn. Sometimes he would reach for her hand in his sleep, then stop before touching, still honoring the line between need and permission. And every time, she would smile softly in the dark and place her fingers through his. Not because fate commanded her, not because the curse demanded it, but because she wanted him, because the world that once rejected him had become, in the circle of her palm, a place where he could finally rest.